Choose action over apathy.
Together, we can protect our winters.
I'm here in Bozeman.
Together, we can protect our winters.
I'm here in Bozeman, Montana, in the new reality of virtual meetings. We are still all connected, albeit in a slightly different way.
So join us. How is cool, how is happening, and how is you?
Hello, and welcome. Protect our winters, friends, families, and members. We are going to get the senator on the line here. We hope you enjoyed our little pre-roll video. Hang with us for 1 second. Hello, Heinrich.
Hey, how are you doing, Brody?
I'm doing all right, thanks. We are getting people into the room now. We have hundreds and hundreds of people signed up for this, so this is going to be awesome.
Right.
I would like to welcome everyone to today's edition of our lobby camp. We are here with Senator Heinrich. My name is Brody Levin. I'm a professional ski mountaineer in Salt Lake City, Utah, where I moved in 2006. I have been skiing for a long time. I've been with Protect Our Winters as a volunteer since 2013. I am the third Riders Alliance member. The Riders Alliance is what Protect Our Winters refers to, our kind of group of athletes and scientists and creatives. We are people that volunteer with Protect Our Winters to help fight climate change. I have been doing it since 2013, again, when I climbed and skied Denali with Protect Our Winters founder, Jeremy Jones. He and I stood on top of the highest peak in North America together, skied down next to each other, and then I found myself with volunteering with Protect Our Winters soon. Today, I'm going to be speaking on behalf of the thousands of members of Protect Our Winters and on behalf of the hundreds of people that are going to be tuning in and watching. So if you guys have any questions or comments, please go ahead and put them in the chat on the right side of your screen over there. Those can be directed to Senator Heinrich. They're going to be moderated through Protect Our Winters staff, who is working behind the scenes and who has been working hard all week through our lobby camp week here at Protect Our Winters. So again, we are going to have hundreds of people watching. All of them want to participate in the polls in the chat that's happening over on the right side of your screen. When you see something pop up, please do go ahead and respond to those polls. With no further ado, I would like to introduce you to the Senator from New Mexico, Martin Heinrich. Welcome.
Oh, it's great to be here, Brody. I really appreciate it. I'm curious if all of your volunteers get started by skiing down Denali.
I have to say that I'm certainly not the only person on the Protect Our Winters Riders Alliance to have skied off the top of Denali, many of whom have skied new routes on Denali, skied things that have never been skied before, but they have skied and snowboarded and mountain biked and trail run all over the world, certainly. Speaking of which, Senator Heinrich, can you tell me a little bit about your experience in the outdoors?
Well, I started out pretty early in my professional career as an outfitter guide, taking a lot of groups of young people into the backcountry every summer. I ran an organization called Cottonwood Gulch Foundation. Now it's known as Cottonwood Gulch Expeditions. It's been around about 90 years now. And it really was incredibly formative. I also was an AmeriCorps volunteer for the Mexican Wolf Recovery Project. And I got involved in politics because I was really passionate about public lands, wildlife, and climate change.
That's very cool. And if I'm not mistaken, your outfitter was that in San Juan County, Utah? Is that right?
I've worked in San Juan County, Utah, on what we now call Bears Ears, that most people knew as Cedar Mesa back in the day. and also worked in all four of the Four Corner states, really Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, and Arizona, and our base camp was in northwestern New Mexico.
That is very, very cool. And I have to share with our viewers today that I kind of feel like I'm going back in time by 2 days, because just 2 days ago, you were willing to volunteer with our Protect Our Winters staff and Riders Alliance members in our training for our lobby camp. We had a virtual lobby camp training on Tuesday afternoon. Senator Heinrich showed up looking in this exact same office. I don't know if you're at home or at your office or at your home office, but looking dapper as always, of course, and ready to help out with the climate change fight. So we appreciate that very much. There are 50 million Americans who are considered part of the outdoor state. And those are people that ski, snowboard, trail run, mountain bike. And that's a quarter of all people that voted in the 2016 election. Wow. That is a massive number of people. And that is people that have a large influence both in their local, state, and federal politics. And I want you to speak a little bit to how this group of outdoor enthusiasts can impact politics in a way that favors them. Because as we know, more than half of people that consider themselves part of the outdoor state do not identify as Democrats. They identify as Republican or other. A lot of them are independents as well. And so how can they vote and act in such a way that benefits them as members of the outdoor state?
You know, it is a broad coalition, and I've spent a lot of my time in public office sort of crafting public land protection legislation that has required really a lot of different voices to be at the table at the same time. And we've gotten better over time about crafting those broad coalitions. And you just can't get things done in Washington, D.C. without those kinds of coalitions. And as long as you can be divided, and as long as an issue is viewed through a purely partisan lens, it's a recipe for failure. And what gives me hope is that 10 years ago, public lands and conservation was seen as a very partisan issue. The dominant voice on Capitol Hill was one of selling off our public lands. And yet this week, we have a piece of legislation on the floor of the United States Senate that will fully fund the Land and Water Conservation Fund, that will invest billions of dollars, almost $10 billion total, into our public lands. That would have not been successful anywhere close to it 10 years ago. And yet that, in the midst of all the other things that divide us in this country right now, is what is bringing us together on Capitol Hill, is what is bipartisan this week. And we need that kind of alliance for climate as well, if we're going to have the places that we care about, whether it's where we ski or where we paddleboard on a high mountain lake, or just the ability to know the kind of seasons that you and I have grown up with be the same experience that our kids and grandkids are going to have, not to mention the economic ramifications of that.
I love how you brought up both climate and public lands kind of in the same sentence there, because we here at Protect Our Winters, whether we're staff or volunteers, we work at that intersection of public lands and climate, as do you. You personally had a giant win on Capitol Hill this week. Can you talk a little bit about that and what happened to the Great Americans Outdoor Act? So
one of the biggest hurdles to getting any piece of legislation on the floor is overcoming a filibuster. And you're in Salt Lake. I'll point out that, one of the most vociferous opponents to public lands, not just individual public lands, but really the idea of public lands, is Senator Lee of Utah. And we knew we would have an attempt to filibuster this incredible landmark conservation legislation. And typically it's hard to muster 60 votes to overcome that. This week we mustered 80 votes, and that was with a few yeses missing. And it really sent the message that this was a broad bipartisan coalition and that we would be successful, that they could delay the progress of this legislation, but at the end of the day, that we would be successful.
I absolutely agree with that. And I want to congratulate you on the Great American Outdoors Act win this week. I would also like to ask you, how do you think that us here at POW and us that care about climate so dearly can ensure that the next big win on public lands can be climate focused and something that is not only a win for climate lands or climate focused? And for our viewers, I just like to explain that a little bit insofar as that public lands and climate are intricately connected. And the way that they are connected is because public lands can often be exploited and become carbon sinks, which then in turn harms the climate. So if we can protect public lands and do that in a way that benefits climate, that is going to be a win for all. So Senator, how can we do that with our next big win for public lands?
Well, I think you said it well. Every piece of public land is either a net carbon source or it's a net carbon sink. And standing healthy forests are sequestering carbon. When we're producing hydrocarbons, fossil fuels off of our public lands, or we're mining for coal and methane is escaping, those are big carbon sources. And so shifting that paradigm around public lands from one of the 1880s, where the assumption is the best thing for our economy and our communities is always to develop an energy source or develop a mineral source, to realizing that in today's world, so oftentimes the best thing you can do with those public lands is to protect a watershed or to protect a recreational asset or to make sure that a forest is healthy and sequestering and taking carbon out of the atmosphere. And that's a shift that the broader public hasn't really thought through yet. And being an articulate, passionate voice for standing up for those public lands and what they can mean in today's economy with the science we know today and the pressure of climate change, that opens up a whole raft of opportunities for individual bills that are benefit to climate, and then eventually very broad bills that are beneficial to public lands and climate.
Well, I like how you mentioned that we kind of have to update our definitions and the way we act as technology changes, as science advances, and as our knowledge of the ways that exploitation can harm our environment changes. Because as much as we do respect history, do respect our old definitions of these things, we also have to be forward thinking, think about future generations, and think about the way it can affect us both physically and financially. Absolutely. Because our economy, as we know, is now favoring clean energy, and it's favoring moving away from fossil fuels. And kind of on that note, at how we advocate for protecting public lands, like I said, to reduce fossil fuel emissions. And in the House, we are pretty big fans of Rep. Grijalva's new bill, the Public Lands and Water Climate Solutions Act. This act works to make sure our public lands can be net zero by 2040. This is our public lands as a whole. What hope do you have that this can actually happen? And what hope do you have that we can turn this into another historic win like the one that you saw this week?
Well, I think everyone here who recognizes the threat that the current path and climate represents is having that same conversation, whether it's Raul Grijalva, who's chairing the Energy and Natural Resources Committee in the House, or whether it's someone here in the Senate who's chairing the Energy and Natural Resources Committee over here. We're looking at our energy sources, we're looking at public lands, we're looking at our footprints and saying, how do we get all of these things economy-wide to be net zero, and then to be, frankly, we're going to have to be a carbon sink soon after that, because we've put so much carbon into the atmosphere over time that, especially to moderate some of the super pollutants, the things that like methane that are 28 times or more powerful than carbon dioxide, we're actually going to have to pull some of that back out of the atmosphere. And, bringing people to the place where they have expertise, whether it's in the energy sector where we're talking about not just going renewable, but all right, now that the electricity is renewable, how do we make sure that it's 100% renewable? And then how do we figure out how to do transportation instead of with gasoline and diesel fuel, to do it with electricity or hydrogen or renewable synthetic fuels? We're having that conversation in every single sector. And I think having the voice of people who are the face of the outdoors in those conversations in individual congressional offices is really, really critical, because you guys are trendsetters. You're the people that folks look to be the voice of our public lands. And so you're sort of the guiding light for many in the generation that is really causing the shift that we're seeing today.
That's really cool to hear, because I mean, us athletes have been in meetings this week with other senators and with Congress people, and it's been really interesting to hear them kind of echo that sentiment, regardless of which side of the aisle they're on. And something else you said that I really appreciated was this kind of focus on specialization. I went to school at a small private liberal arts school in Salt Lake City, and I studied economics, and I understand the efficiencies that come with specialization. And along those lines, I was reading an article recently that mentioned you're one of the few engineers in Congress, if I'm not mistaken, and that you believe and 100% clean energy, and in having an entire energy grid that is 100% clean energy is possible, is doable, and is economically viable. Can you share a little bit about that vision with us, how you know it's possible, why you know it's possible, and most importantly, how we as climate proponents can help you advocate to achieve that?
Yeah, I think it's really important to make it clear to the public that this is not out in the future. This is now, both the threat and the solutions. So when I was in college, a group of my friends and I got together and we built a carbon fiber solar car that we raced from Dallas, Texas to Minneapolis, Minnesota.
What year was that?
That was we started building it in 92. We raced it in 93.
I can't believe you did that with Elon Musk. That is really cool.
And I see like all of these technologies that we used for the first time in the car industry, just moving into real adoption today, whether it's regenerative braking, the Prius was the first car to actually do that, whether it's the adoption of carbon fiber into all kinds of parts as Tesla does today, or electric drivetrain. And oftentimes we get caught up in this rhetoric that we can't do this stuff, but the science is there. Generating electricity in a renewable way with the sort of storage technologies that are coming online today, we basically solve the biggest problems with the electric grid. The next step is to make sure that transportation gets clean and that we electrify all the things in our lives that currently use direct fossil fuels, whether we're heating water in our homes or space heating in our office buildings. We can shift those things to electricity and we can generate that electricity renewably. Then we have to solve some tougher things like how do we make aluminum and steel and fertilizer. All those are like sort of our big industrial sources today, and they're all done with fossil fuels. But we're now seeing more and more efforts to create thermal fuels by making renewable hydrogen. So all of these things are possible today. We just have to get the price points down to where it's cheaper to do it the clean way than the old dirty way. And that's where policy comes in to help move us down. If you look at solar, in 1977, I think solar was something like $70 some a watt. Today, it's way under $1 a watt. The price just keeps falling all the time. And we have to do that across all of these technologies and across our entire economy. But the path is clear.
So this video is going to be shared with thousands of Protect Our Winters members. And these are people that vote the outdoors. What can they do to help you advocate for that path?
I think get involved with their local congressional representative. Republican or Democrat, we can make this an American issue rather than a partisan issue. And I think more and more, if you look at the polling among young people, it really doesn't matter whether you're an independent, unaffiliated, or Republican or Democratic voter. Young people understand the threat, and they understand that we can do something about it. And the more you can demand real leadership on these issues, the faster we'll make progress.
You hear it here first from Senator Heinrich, Protect Our Winters. Get in touch with your local congressional office. And like he said, we have been lobbying in DC this week, and what we've been hearing is not only young people saying this, but this is our representatives across the border understanding the fact that this is the future, and we're just trying to figure out the best way to reach it. We have a question from the audience, actually.
Great.
The question is, Senator, what can be done about the environmental rollbacks currently being made under our current administration?
There are many things we can do to resist those rollbacks. A lot of them happen at the states. But frankly, this is an administration that not respect the fundamental environmental laws that are on the books. And so getting involved electorally, this is obviously, I'm doing this on official time, so I'm not going to make this a partisan electoral speech, but make sure your voice is heard and make sure you vote, because people respect that. If you vote, people will listen to you.
I appreciate that very much. And we have a big push for voting throughout the year, and especially coming up for the November elections. So that is awesome to hear. Here in Utah, we have our primaries coming up on June 30th, and I'm sure we're not the only state with that case. This week, the POW community, these thousands of people that we have following us, is making calls to their members of Congress. And we have these very same asks that we've been asking in our meetings with Congress people this week. Why do you believe rebuilding the clean energy economy, which is what we are pushing for to make sure the clean energy economy can bounce back from the COVID pandemic, why do you believe that is critical, and what tips do you have for these people making these calls from home?
Well, it's foundational to building not just the economy that we had 4 months ago, but I think we're at a time of such incredible stress that I think it's one of those times when we can take a step back and say, I don't want to just go back to January. Let's all think about building the economy we want and deserve. And there's no question that's a clean economy. Now, we have lost now about 110,000 Americans to this virus. It's important to realize that we lose over 100,000 Americans every year to illnesses caused by pollution, to people who have asthma attacks and heart attacks and strokes that are induced because of our addiction to fossil fuels and the pollution that creates. And those impacts are oftentimes concentrated in specific communities. We can build a cleaner, better economy that is more fair and more equitable if we make these investments.
And I would like to add that those specific communities you're referring to are frequently minority communities who are disproportionately impacted by the effects of climate change, the way that you're referring.
No question.
I would like to hear, maybe you can relate that a little bit, the calls that people are making from home to their members of Congress this week. You wrote a Dear Colleague letter this week to the leadership about the importance of providing this relief and rebuilding a healthy economy. So I want people to understand that it's not just being done from them in their living room at home, but it's also being done on Capitol Hill. Can you address that?
You bet. So one of my former colleagues that I've served with in the House of Representatives is Paul Tonko of New York. We were both mechanical engineers by training, and we decided to push on leadership on both sides of Capitol Hill in our respective caucuses to include this as a priority as we recover from the economic damage that's been done by this pandemic. And I think there's been a debate about, we have to respond first to the healthcare crisis. We have to stem the bleeding in small businesses. And that's absolutely true. But we're now at a point where we're 3 months into this, and we have to make sure that we don't just respond to the devastating damage that's been done, but we have to plan out a recovery. So not just a response, but a recovery, and recovering to the kind of clean energy economy and the kind of broader economy that we want. And I'm really proud of the number of House and Senate members who signed that letter and the response that we're starting to see from the leadership now as a result of that letter.
And did you see those signature responses from both sides of the aisle?
We were focused on, first and foremost, making our leadership responsive to those of us who've worked on these issues. But that's sort of the first step to then opening the negotiations and having a broader, including those things in broader bipartisan negotiated packages. And we certainly have individual advocates who understand the jobs value of those industries in their states. What we have less on the other side of the aisle is people in leadership who are willing to listen to those voices and make it a higher priority.
Gotcha. And that's where this group of people who are watching this can come in useful, because they can speak out to that leadership as constituents.
Exactly right.
You sit on the first Senate Democrat Special Committee on the climate crisis. Is that right?
That's correct.
And last year you saw three of my friends, Caroline,
Yep.
Jeremy, and your son's friend, Tommy, testify in front of the committee. In fact, I'm going to think that you thought it was pretty wonderful because I heard that you were taking a little video clip of them as they were speaking to send to your son. And I think that's pretty cool because these are people I look up to as well, because we're not so indifferent. I walk up and down mountains, you walk up and down the hills or the steps of Capitol Hill. We do the same thing. And I think the fact that we're all members of the outdoor state is important. You think these are powerful messages being shared in this special committee. Why do you think it's critical that the outdoor community, members of the outdoor state, speak up on climate now when they may feel as though they have administration that's not willing to listen?
Because it's not just about an administration, it's about changing the entire dynamic on Capitol Hill. And it's about getting our government in all its branches and all its parties to recognize the incredible scale of the threat from climate change, and then come together and argue about what are the right responses. We can argue about whether we solve this in a conservative frame or a more progressive frame. To some degree, I'm flexible once we get to that point. Let's get it to the point where we can recognize we all have an issue, and then we'll fight over what the best response to that is, and we'll build a better future for all of us.
Right, you're worried about the actual actions instead of the framing under which that's done. Is that right?
Exactly right. And we don't have time anymore to embrace the kind of denialism that's really been less about the facts and more about protecting incumbent industries longer than they would be financially viable in a pure free market system like you might have studied in college.
Absolutely. Senator, that is so cool to hear. And it's really cool as someone who cares about the outdoor, and my entire livelihood revolves around the outdoors, to know that we have elected officials on Capitol Hill that share these views with me. So I really appreciate that. And I'm sure the entire outdoor community, the outdoor state, and Protect Our Winters members do as well. I want to be completely respectful of your time. We have come to the end, but I really want to thank you for coming today. Did you have anything that you want to share with the outdoor state?
I want to thank everybody, really encourage them to lean in this week. And Brody, next time I see you, I hope maybe it's on top of Kachina Peak in northern New Mexico.
I hope it's on top of Kachina Peak too. You know about the outdoor industry because you've got Outside Magazine right there in Santa Fe, so you have an impact as much as anywhere else. Protect Our Winters, I want to thank you guys so much for signing in today, watching this, being here with us. Senator Heinrich from New Mexico was very lovely to give us a half hour of your day today to make this happen. Protect Our Winters folks, Tommy Caldwell will be joining us this evening at 5 p.m. to wrap Lobby Camp. We have a general Lobby Camp wrap event tonight at 5 o'clock. Information is on protectourwinters.org. Tommy Caldwell will be there with you, sharing the time. We appreciate you, Mark Heinrich, for your time today and your service and your leadership on climate. Hope you guys have an awesome day. Find some time to get outside, and thanks for tuning in. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.